This is the Earth, as it looked 90 million years ago. Geologists call this period the Late Cretaceous. It was a time of extreme global warming, when dinosaurs still ruled the planet. They went about their lives secure in their place at the top of the food chain, oblivious to the changes taking place around them. The continents were drifting apart, opening huge rifts in the Earth's crust. They flooded, becoming seas. Algae thrived in the extreme heat, poisoning the water. They died and fell in their trillions to the bottom of the rifts. Rivers washed sediment into the seas, until the organic remains of the algae were buried. As the pressure grew, so did the heat, until a chemical reaction transformed the organics into hydrocarbon fossil fuels, oil, and natural gas. A similar process occurred on land, which produced coal. It took nature about 5 million years to create the fossil fuels that the world consumes in 1 year. The modern way of life is dependent on this fossilized sunlight, although a surprising number of people take it for granted. Since 1860, geologists have discovered over 2 trillion barrels of oil. Since then, the world has used approximately half. Before you can pump oil, you have to discover it. At first, it was easy to find and cheap to extract. The first great American oil field was Spindletop, discovered in 1900. Many more followed. Geologists scoured America. They found enormous deposits of oil, natural gas, and coal. America produced more oil than any other country, enabling it to become an industrial superpower. Once an oil well starts producing oil, it's only a matter of time before it enters a decline. Individual wells have different production rates. When many wells are averaged together, the combined graph looks like a bell curve. Typically, it takes 40 years after the peak of discovery for a country to reach its peak of production, after which it enters a permanent fall. In the 1950s, Shell geophysicist M. King Hubbard predicted that America's oil production would peak in 1970, 40 years after the peak of US oil discovery. Few believed him. However, in 1970, American oil production peaked and entered a permanent decline. Hubbard was vindicated. From this point on, America would depend increasingly on imported oil. This made her vulnerable to supply disruptions and contributed to the economic mayhem of the 1973 and 1979 oil shocks. The 1930s saw the highest rate of oil discoveries in US history. In spite of advanced technology, the decline in the discovery of new American oil fields has been relentless. More recent finds, such as Anwar, would at best provide enough oil for 17 months. Even the new Jack 2 field in the Gulf of Mexico would only supply a few months of domestic demand. Though large, neither field comes close to satisfying America's energy requirements. Evidence is now mounting that world oil production is peaking or is close to it. Globally, the rate of discovery of new oil fields peaked in the 1960s. Over 40 years later, the decline in discovery of new fields seems unstoppable. 54 of the 65 major oil-producing nations have already peaked in production. Many of the others are expected to follow in the near future. The world will need to bring the equivalent of a new Saudi Arabia into production every 3 years to make up for declining output in existing oil fields. In the 1960s, 6 barrels of oil were found for every one that was used. 4 decades later, the world consumes between 3 and 6 barrels of oil for every one that it finds. Once the peak of world oil production is reached, demand for oil will outstrip supply, and the price of gasoline will fluctuate wildly, affecting far more than the cost of filling a car. Modern cities are fossil fuel dependent. Even roads are made from asphalt, a petroleum product, as are the roofs of many homes. Large areas would be uninhabitable without heating in the winter or air conditioning in the summer. Suburban sprawl encourages people to drive many miles to work, school, and stores. Major cities have been zoned with residential and commercial areas placed far apart, forcing people to drive. Suburbia and many communities were designed on the assumption of plentiful oil and energy. Chemicals derived from fossil fuels, or petrochemicals, are essential in the manufacture of countless products. The modern system of agriculture is heavily dependent on fossil fuels, as are hospitals, aviation, water distribution systems, and the US military, which alone uses about 140 million barrels of oil a year. Fossil fuels are also essential for the creation of plastics and polymers, key ingredients in computers, entertainment devices, and clothing. The global economy currently depends on endless growth, demanding an increasing supply of cheap energy. We are so dependent on oil and other fossil fuels that even a small disruption in supply may have far-reaching effects on every aspect of our lives. Energy is the ability to do work. The average American has available the energy equivalent of about 150 slaves working 24 hours a day. Materials that store this energy for work are called fuels. Some fuels contain more energy than others. This is called energy density. Of these fuels, oil is the most critical. The world consumes 30 billion barrels a year, equal to 1 cubic mile of oil, which contains as much energy as would be generated from 52 nuclear power plants working for the next 50 years. Although oil only generates 1.6% of US electricity, it powers 96% of all transportation. In 2008, 2/3 of America's oil was imported. Most was from Canada, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Nigeria, Iraq, and Angola. Several factors make oil unique. It is energy dense. 1 barrel contains the energy equivalent of almost 3 years of human labor. It is liquid at room temperature, easy to transport, and usable in small engines. To acquire energy, you have to use energy. The trick is to use smaller amounts to find and extract larger amounts. This is called EE.UU, energy return on energy invested. Conventional oil is a good example. The easy-to-extract, high-quality crude was pumped first. Oilmen spent the energy equivalent of 1 barrel of oil to find and extract 100. The EE.UU of oil was 100. As the easy-to-find oil was pumped first, exploration moved into deep waters, or distant countries, using increasing amounts of energy to do so. Often, the oil found now is heavy or sour crude and is expensive to refine. The EE.UU for oil today is as low as 10. If you use more energy to get the fuel than is contained in the fuel, it's not worth the effort to get it. It is possible to convert one fuel source into another. Every time you do so, some of the energy contained in the original fuel is lost. For instance, There is unconventional oil, tar sands and shale. Tar sands are found mainly in Canada. 2/3 of the world's shale is in the US. Both of these fuels can be converted to synthetic crude oil. However, this requires large amounts of heat in fresh water, reducing their EE.UU, which varies from 5 to as low as 1.5. Shale is an exceptionally poor fuel, pound for pound containing about 1/3 the energy of a box of breakfast cereal. Coal exists in vast quantities and generates almost half of the planet's electricity. The world uses almost 2 cubic miles of coal a year. However, global coal production may peak before 2040. The claim that America has centuries' worth of coal is deceptive, as it fails to account for growing demand and decreasing quality. Much of the high-quality anthracite coal is gone, leaving lower-quality coal that is less energy-dense. Production issues arise as surface coal is depleted and miners have to dig deeper and in less accessible areas. Many use destructive mountaintop removal to reach coal deposits, causing environmental mayhem. Natural gas is often found alongside oil and coal. North American discovery of conventional gas peaked in the 1950s and production peaked in the early 70s. If the discovery graph is moved forward by 23 years, the possible future of North American conventional natural gas production is revealed. Recent breakthroughs have allowed the extraction of unconventional natural gas, such as shale gas, which might help offset decline in the years ahead. Unconventional natural gas is controversial, as it needs high energy prices to be profitable. Even with unconventional gas, there may be a peak in global natural gas production around 2030. Large uranium reserves for nuclear fission still exist. To replace the 10 terawatts the world currently generates from fossil fuels would require 10,000 nuclear plants. At that rate, the known reserves of uranium would last for only 10 to 20 years. Experiments with plutonium-based fast breeder reactors in France and Japan have been expensive failures. Nuclear fusion faces massive technical obstacles. Then there are the renewables. Wind power has a high EE.UU, but is intermittent. Hydropower is reliable, but most rivers in the developed world are already dammed. Conventional geothermal power plants use existing hotspots near the Earth's surface. They are limited to those areas. In the experimental EGS system, 2 shafts would be drilled 6 miles deep. Water is pumped down one shaft to be heated in fissures, then rise up the other, generating power. According to a recent MIT report, this technology might supply 10% of US electricity by 2050. Wave power is restricted to coastal areas. The energy density of waves varies from region to region. Transporting wave-generated electricity inland would be challenging. Also, the salty ocean environment is corrosive to turbines. Biofuels are fuels that are grown. Wood has a low energy density and grows slowly. The world uses 3.7 cubic miles of wood a year. Biodiesel and ethanol are made from crops grown by petroleum-powered agriculture. The energy profit from these fuels is very low. Some politicians want to turn corn into ethanol. Using ethanol to supply 1/10 of projected US oil use in 2020 would require 3% of America's land. To supply 1/3 would require 3 times the area now used to grow food. To supply all US petroleum consumption in 2020 would take twice as much land as is used to grow food. Hydrogen has to be extracted from natural gas, coal or water, which uses more energy than is generated from the hydrogen. This makes a hydrogen economy unlikely. All the world's photovoltaic solar panels generate as much electricity as 2 coal power plants. The equivalent of between 1 and 4 tons of coal are used in the manufacture of a single solar panel. We'd have to cover as many as 140,000 square miles with panels to meet current world demand. As of 2007, there were only about 4 square miles. Concentrated solar power, or solar thermal, has great potential, though at the moment there are only a small number of plants operating. They are also limited to sunny climates, requiring large amounts of electricity to be transmitted over long distances. All of the alternatives to oil depend on oil-powered machinery, or require materials such as plastics that are produced from oil. When considering future claims of amazing new fuels or inventions, ask, does the advocate have a working commercial model of the invention? What is its energy density? Can it be stored or easily distributed? Is it reliable or intermittent? Can it be scaled to a national level? Are there hidden engineering challenges? What is the EE.UU? What are the environmental impacts? Remember that large numbers can be deceptive. For example, 1 billion barrels of oil will satisfy global demand for only 12 days. A transition from fossil fuels would be a monumental challenge. As of 2007, coal generates 48.5% of US electricity. 21.6% is from natural gas. 1.6% is from petroleum. 19.4% is from nuclear. 5.8% is from hydro. Other renewables only generate 2.5%. Is it possible to replace a system based on fossil fuels with a patchwork of alternatives? Major technological advances are needed, as well as political will and cooperation, massive investment, international consensus, the retrofitting of the $45 trillion global economy, including transportation, manufacturing industries, and agricultural systems, as well as officials competent to manage the transition. If all these are achieved, could the current way of life continue? These bacteria live in a bottle. Their population doubles every minute. At 11 a.m., there is 1 bacterium. At 12 noon, the bottle is full. It is half full at 11:59, leaving only enough space for 1 more doubling. The bacteria see the danger. They search for new bottles and find 3. They assume that their problem is solved. By 12 noon, the first bottle is full. By 12:01, the second bottle is full. By 12:02, all the bottles are full. This is the problem that we face due to the doubling caused by exponential growth. When humanity began to use coal and oil as fuel sources, it experienced unprecedented growth. Even low growth rates produce large increases over time. At a 1% growth rate, an economy will double in 70 years. At 2% rate, doubles in 35 years. At a 10% growth rate, an economy will double in only 7 years. If an economy grows at the current average of 3%, it doubles every 23 years. With each doubling, demand for energy and resources will exceed all the previous doublings combined. The financial system is built on the assumption of growth, which requires an increasing supply of energy to support it. Banks lend money they don't have, in effect creating it. The borrowers use the newly created loan money to grow their businesses and pay back the debt, with an interest payment which requires more growth. Due to this creation of debt-formed money, most of the world's money represents a debt with interest to be paid. Without continual, new and ever larger generations of borrowers to produce growth and thus pay off these debts, the world economy will collapse. Like a Ponzi scheme, the system must expand or die. Partly through this debt system, the effects of economic growth have been spectacular in GDP, damming of rivers, water use, fertilizer consumption, urban population, paper consumption, motor vehicles, communications and tourism. World population has grown to 7 billion and is expected to exceed 9 billion by 2050. On a flat, infinite Earth, this might not be a problem. However, as the Earth is round and finite, we will eventually face limits to growth. Economic expansion has resulted in increases in atmospheric nitrous oxide and methane, ozone depletion, increases in great floods, damage to ocean ecosystems, including nitrogen runoff, loss of rainforest and woodland, increases in domesticated land, and species extinctions. If we place a single grain of rice on the first square of a chessboard, double this and place 2 grains on the second, double again and place 4 on the third, double again and place 8 on the fourth, and continue this way, putting on each square twice the number of grains than were on the previous one. By the time we reach the final square, we need an astronomical number of grains. 9 quintillion, 223 quadrillion, 372 trillion, 36 billion, 854,776,000 grains. More grain than the human race has grown in the last 10,000 years. Modern economies, like the grains on the chessboard, double every few decades. On which square of the chessboard are we? Besides energy, civilization demands numerous essential resources: fresh water, topsoil, food, forests, and many kinds of minerals and metals. Growth is limited by the essential resource in scarcest supply. A barrel is made of staves, and like water filling a barrel, growth can go no further than the lowest stave, or the most limited essential resource. Humans currently utilize 40% of all photosynthesis on Earth. Though it might be possible to use 80%, we are unlikely to ever use 160%. The global food supply relies heavily on fossil fuels. Before World War I, all agriculture was organic. Following the invention of fossil fuel-derived fertilizers and pesticides, there were massive improvements in food production, allowing for increases in human population. The use of artificial fertilizers has fed far more people than would have been possible with organic agriculture alone. Fossil fuels are needed for farming equipment, transportation, refrigeration, packaging in plastic, and cooking. Modern agriculture uses land to turn fossil fuels into food and food into people. About 7 calories of fossil fuel energy are used to produce 1 calorie of food. In America, food travels approximately 1,500 miles from farm to customer. Besides fossil fuel decline, there are several threats to the current system of food production. Cheap energy, improved technology, and subsidies have allowed massive fish catches. Global fish catches peaked in the late 1980s, forcing fishermen to move into deep waters. Nitrogen runoff by fossil fuel-based fertilizers poisons rivers and seas, creating enormous dead zones. At this rate, all fish populations are projected to collapse by 2048. Acid rain from cities and industries leaches the soil of vital nutrients such as potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Another threat is a lack of water. Many farms use water pumped from underground aquifers for irrigation. The aquifers need thousands of years to fill up, but can be pumped dry in a few decades, like oil wells. America's massive Ogallala aquifer has fallen so low that many farmers have had to return to less productive dry land farming. Additionally, the use of irrigation and fertilizers can lead to salinization, the accumulation of salt in the soil. This is a major cause of desertification. Still another threat is topsoil loss. 200 years ago, there were 6 feet of topsoil on the American prairies. Today, through tillage and poor practices, approximately half is gone. Irrigation encourages the growth of stem rust fungi like UG99, which has the potential to destroy 80% of the world's grain harvest. According to Norman Borlaug, father of the Green Revolution, stem rust has immense potential for social and human destruction. The use of biofuels means that less land will be available for food production. An area has a finite carrying capacity. This is the number of animals or people that can live there indefinitely. If a species overshoots the carrying capacity of that area, it will die back until the population returns to its natural limits. The world has avoided this die-off by finding new lands to cultivate or by increasing production, which has been possible largely thanks to oil. To continue growth, more resources are required than the Earth can provide, but no new planets are available. In the face of all these challenges, global food production must double by 2050 to feed the growing world population. 1 billion people are already malnourished or starving. There will be challenges in feeding over 9 billion in the years to come, when world oil and natural gas production will be in decline. The global economy grows exponentially at about 3% a year, consuming increasing amounts of non-renewable fuels, minerals and metals, as well as renewable resources like water, forests, soils and fish faster than they can be replenished. Even at a growth rate of 1%, an economy will double in 70 years. The problem is intensified by other factors. Globalization allows people on one continent to buy goods and food made by those on another. The lines of supply are long, placing strains on a limited oil resource. We now rely on distant countries for basic necessities. Modern cities are fossil fuel dependent. Most banking systems are based on debt, forcing people into a spiral of loans and repayments, producing growth. What can be done in the face of these problems? Many believe that the crisis can be prevented through conservation, technology, smart growth, recycling, electric cars and hybrids, substitution, or voting. Conservation will save you money, but it alone won't save the planet. If some people cut back on oil use, the reduced demand will drive down the price, allowing others to buy it for less. In the same fashion, a more efficient engine that uses less energy will, paradoxically, lead to greater energy use. In the 19th century, English economist William Stanley Jevons realized that better steam engines made coal a more cost-effective fuel source, which led to the use of more steam engines, which increased total coal consumption. Growth of use will consume any energy or resource saved through conservation. Many believe that scientists will solve these problems with new technology. However, technology is not energy. Technology can channel energy into work, but it can't replace it. It also consumes resources. For instance, computers are made with 1/10 of the energy needed to make a car. More advanced technologies may make the situation worse, as many require rare minerals, which are also approaching limits. For example, 97% of the world's rare earths are produced by China, most from a single mine in Inner Mongolia. These minerals are used in catalytic converters, aircraft engines, high-efficiency magnets and hard drives, hybrid car batteries, lasers, portable X-rays, shielding for nuclear reactors, compact discs, hybrid vehicle motors, low-energy light bulbs, fiber optics, and flat-screen displays. China has begun restricting the export of these minerals, as demand soars. So-called sustainable growth, or smart growth, won't help, as it also uses non-renewable metals and minerals in ever-increasing quantities, including rare earths. Recycling will not solve the problem, as it requires energy, and the process is not 100% efficient. It is only possible to reclaim a fraction of the material being recycled. A large portion is lost forever as waste. Electric cars run on electricity. As most power is generated from fossil fuels, this is not a solution. Also, cars of all types consume oil in their production. Each tire alone requires about 7 gallons of petroleum. There are around 800 million cars in the world as of 2010. At current growth rates, this number would reach 2 billion by 2025. It is unlikely that the planet can support this many vehicles for long, regardless of their power source. Many economists believe that the free market will substitute one energy source with another through technological innovation. However, the main substitutes to oil face their own decline rates. Substitution also fails to account for the time needed to prepare for a transition. The US Department of Energy's Hirsch report estimates that at least 2 decades would be needed to prepare for the effects of peak oil. The issues of energy shortages, resource depletion, topsoil loss, and pollution are all symptoms of a single, larger problem: growth. As long as our financial system demands endless growth, reform is unlikely to succeed. What then will the future look like? Optimists believe that growth will continue forever, without limits. Pessimists think that we're heading towards a new Stone Age, or extinction. The truth may lie between these extremes. It is possible that society might fall back to a simpler state, one in which energy use is a lot less. This would mean a harder life for most, more manual labour, more farm work, and local production of goods, food, and services. What should a person do to prepare for such a possible future? Expect a decrease in supplies of food and goods from faraway places. Start walking or cycling. Get used to using less electricity. Get out of debt. Try to avoid banks. Instead of shopping at big box stores, support local businesses. Buy food grown locally at farmers' markets. Instead of a lawn, consider gardening to grow your own food. Learn how to preserve it. Consider the use of local currencies, should the larger economy cease to function, and develop greater self-sufficiency. None of these steps will prevent collapse, but they might improve your chances in a low-energy future, one in which we will have to be more self-reliant, as our ancestors once were.
La Agencia Internacional de Energía estimó que el auge del petróleo de esquisto en Estados Unidos está creando un choque de oferta que revoluciona el mercado energético y que se expande a todo el mundo. Según la agencia, el crecimiento de este filón energético permitirá que la oferta mundial de petróleo sea superior a la demanda, y ello debería ayudar a calmar un mercado petrolero que estaba relativamente tenso desde hace varios años. Asimismo, prevé un aumento de la capacidad de producción planetaria de crudo de 8.3 millones de barriles diarios entre 2012 y 2018 para llegar a los 103 barriles.
Contamos con vastos recursos que se encuentran en yacimientos no convencionales, es decir, en aguas profundas, en formaciones de lutitas, de donde se puede extraer petróleo y gas shale, como se conoce comúnmente.
In 2006, filmmaker Josh Fox received a letter in the mail offering him $100,000 for permission to drill for natural gas on his land. He knew that in 2005, Congress had passed a bill exempting gas companies from environmental regulations. He wanted to know what impact the drilling would have on his land, so he took his camera across the United States to discover the truth about hydraulic fracturing.
The method of gas drilling they use is called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. It blasts a mix of water and chemicals 8,000 feet into the ground. The fracking itself is like a mini earthquake. The intense pressure breaks apart the rock and frees up the gas.
6 states have documented over 1,000 incidents of groundwater contamination.
It bubbles and hisses when it comes out. I won't drink it.
They can drill whether we like it or not.
It's a free-for-all.
Our water was good before they started drilling. Then when they got done, it was bad.
Obviously, we have a problem here.
The Colorado Oil and Gas Commission is aware of the situation and will probably be doing some additional testing in the area as soon as possible.
There has been concern raised about the methods to tap these valuable resources. They have been characterized as environmentally risky and inadequately regulated. Such reports are not accurate.
The neurological effects are very insidious.
Everybody was sick, including me. I have these lesions in my brain.
You get pains all of your body.
If you weren't able to do this hydraulic fracturing, how much more would we be dependent on foreign oil and terrorism?
I have one quote here from you that says that you're trying to do this in a way that doesn't damage the environment. But you also said recently that water contamination is inevitable.
Well, yeah, I mean...
are those contradictory, or...?
Despite documented health risks and environmental impact, hydraulic fracturing is spreading across the globe.
It's amazing that what took Mother Nature millions of years to build can be destroyed in a few hours with a piece of heavy machinery.
What it's doing is searching for a problem that does not exist.
Whoa, Jesus Christ.
It's not supposed to do that.
Al respecto es el senador del Partido Acción Nacional, Raúl García, a quien precisamente tengo en la línea. Senador, perdóneme García, Raúl Gracia, una disculpa senador, y le agradezco mucho que tome la llamada, y justamente este tema del fracking es un tema muy interesante en el que también se está centrando mucho esta reforma.
Efectivamente es un tema que ya existía en la exploración de nuestro país, no es nuevo, pero que obviamente con esta reforma energética pues su implementación se incrementará en gran cuantía. Creo que debemos de tener una posición intermedia, no el extremo de quienes la pretenden impedir en su totalidad, pero tampoco de quienes la quieren realizar sin ningún control y de forma indiscriminada. Como toda actividad industrial, pues obviamente tiene efectos en el medio ambiente, claro, y se deben establecer los mecanismos para garantizar pues que esta afectación no sea mayor y que dé sustentabilidad al medio ambiente y a nuestra tierra, nuestro país.
Senador, tenemos algunas experiencias en el país, sin embargo hay una amplia experiencia en Estados Unidos, en donde pues ya este tipo de extracción, tanto de gas natural como del mismo petróleo, el petróleo de lutitas, porque salen las dos cosas, sí, podría colocar, según estudios, a México en una posición muy interesante en reservas de gas natural por esta vía, y nos pone en una clara ventaja ante muchos otros países teniendo estas grandes reservas de este tipo de gas, que está de cierto modo comprobado al tener una gran frontera con Texas, que lo está haciendo de forma desmedida, y también Arizona y también Nuevo México, que también están empezando a experimentar. Entonces se convierte este tipo de exploración en una exploración importante, que tiene una derrama de capital importante, que tenemos un precedente, por ejemplo, con el gas, en donde ya hay un mercado privado que hace la distribución y hace la repartición en franquicia. Tenemos también, ciertos antecedentes económicos, inclusive de compras de tierras anticipadas a la reforma energética. Vamos, hay un tema muy grande.
Sí, es un tema de gran relevancia y efectivamente hay que proteger nuestro medio ambiente, pero también hay que generar crecimiento económico en nuestro país. A mí me toca ser de Nuevo León y cuando voy en la carretera de Laredo a San Antonio, pues obviamente que pueblos que antes no tenían la mayor relevancia, hoy tienen gran inversión, gran crecimiento y se ve únicamente pasar por la carretera. Nosotros esperaríamos que obviamente que en las zonas que tiene esta potencialidad de gas lutitas, pues en nuestro país también se dé este crecimiento y esto beneficiaría en empleos para los mexicanos. Igualmente tener gran capacidad de gas, pues le permite a nuestras industrias tener este insumo en forma económica y en consecuencia ser competitivo en su producción tanto a nivel nacional como a nivel internacional de los productos que en su generación requieren de este insumo.
Senador Raúl Gracia, te agradezco mucho, senador, por el Partido de Acción Nacional, por habernos tomado la llamada.
Al contrario, pero me conocía la orden.
Bueno, este tema del fracking y del shale gas y del shale oil, como es mejor conocido en los Estados Unidos, también tiene otro punto de vista, un punto de vista un poquito más ecológico, y tenemos que analizarlo también.
Estas montañas son una mina de oro negro. Los geólogos estiman que podrían transformarse en más de 3.000 millones de barriles de petróleo. Es el milagro de la pizarra bituminosa. Hace tiempo que se sabe de su existencia, pero extraerla salía muy caro. Ahora que el petróleo está por las nubes, una empresa petrolera crea verdad con una fórmula rentable. Se perforan pozos en la roca y se introducen varillas metálicas que calientan la piedra a 650 grados. A esta temperatura el petróleo se separa de la roca y se puede bombear.
This is the final product that we got, which can be used as a combination of jet fuel, diesel fuel and naphtha for gasoline.
El reto es evitar que el petróleo se filtre con el agua, para lo que se necesita congelar la zona que rodea los pozos. En resumen, mucha energía y mucha agua, un bien que escasea en la zona y que es el origen del rechazo de los vecinos y de los grupos ecologistas. Detalles menores para la petrolera que ya se frota las manos. Si funciona, calculan que se podrán producir cientos de miles de barriles al día. Pero ese vuelco a la producción mundial de crudo tendrá que esperar al menos 10 años.
Crece la preocupación que la crisis de Irak afecte los precios del petróleo y la economía mundial. ¿Por qué? Vamos a poner esto en contexto. El grupo suní autodenominado Estado Islámico de Irak y Siria están dominando territorios con importantes recursos económicos y militares en Irak, riesgo de una guerra civil con chiitas en el sur y ahora en el poder. 3 preocupaciones. La primera, aunque el conflicto se concentra en el norte del país, no en el sur donde está el 75% de la producción petrolera del país, si la situación sigue escalando, llegaría al sur, afectaría la producción y el precio del barril de petróleo podría subir entre 10 y 15 dólares según estimaciones. Segunda preocupación, la oferta futura. El consumo global se está incrementando y uno de los productores claves para cubrir esa demanda, ¿quién es? Irak. Se estima que este país proveerá el 60% del incremento de la producción de la OPEP en los próximos 10 años. La OPEP ofrece cerca del 40% del petróleo mundial. La inestabilidad puede afectar los planes de inversión y producción. Y por último, preocupa que el conflicto entre suníes y chiitas alcance a los estados del Golfo Pérsico, donde el 23% de las exportaciones petroleras de Estados Unidos vienen de ahí. Vamos a conectarnos con Jorge Piñón de la Universidad de Texas. Piñón, es un gusto tenerte en el programa. ¿Estás de acuerdo con la lectura que hice?
Gracias, Javier. Yo creo que sí, está muy bien presentada la situación. No solamente la preocupación es sobre Irak, pero la preocupación es de lo que le llamamos el impacto o el efecto dominó, que en algún momento llega a impactar a países como Arabia Saudita, Qatar y Kuwait. Tenemos otro problema, y eso es que un cambio de gobierno, un cambio de régimen en Irak puede ser por un grupo de personas que no tienen disciplina ninguna, como lo que sucedió, por ejemplo, en Libia, donde perdimos la producción de Libia pero hoy Libia no está bajo un gobierno organizado, no bajo un gobierno estable, y esa producción no se ha podido recuperar. Así que el problema que tenemos en Irak no solamente un posible cambio de régimen, pero también tenemos un posible cambio por un régimen que no tenga la disciplina económica y administrativa para mantener ese nivel de producción del país.
La preocupación que hay que si sucediera que los grupos sunnis tomaran posesión del sur y se viera quebrada, digamos, la producción en el sur, que es donde se concentra la mayor producción de Irak, pudiera tener un efecto en la economía mundial, porque no conviene que siga incrementando el precio del petróleo en medio de una recuperación. La gente piensa en Estados Unidos, pero se olvidan que China, cerca del 10% de la importación petrolera viene de Irak. Ahora, el contraargumento, algunos dicen, bueno, pues lo que tienen que hacer los países es buscar otras opciones. Si se le corta a Irak, se le corta a Medio Oriente, bueno, China puede buscar a otros países como Venezuela, por ejemplo. Estados Unidos puede buscar a México. ¿Qué tú le dirías a ese argumento?
Bueno, el problema es que hay un solo país en el mundo hoy que tiene capacidad adicional para incrementar su producción entre 2 y 3 millones de barriles diarios, y ese es Arabia Saudita. Es decir, no, Venezuela ya está a su cupo, Nigeria está a su cupo, Angola, los Estados Unidos no podemos exportar petróleo, somos importadores netos de petróleo. El único país en el mundo hoy en día, en un periodo de quizás 2-3 meses, pueda incrementar su producción de petróleo es Arabia Saudita, y ese margen es de solamente 2 o 3 millones de barriles diarios, que es exactamente más o menos la capacidad que podamos perder de Irak. Así que no solamente algunos países consumidores vamos a tener que reducir el consumo de petróleo, pero también no hay otra solución. Mencionaste anteriormente el dilema que tiene India. Muchos de estos países han puesto todos sus huevos en una misma canasta. Y esa canasta es la canasta del Golfo Pérsico o la canasta de Irán o de Arabia Saudita, que son los países más conflictivos. Así que la Unión Soviética, por ejemplo, la Unión Soviética hoy en día, que es el segundo mayor productor de petróleo en el mundo, no ha incrementado su producción petrolera en los últimos 12-18 meses. Así que ese es otro problema que vamos a tener. Arabia Saudita es el único país que tiene la capacidad para llenar el vacío que Irak pudiera dejar en el mercado.
Piñón, no quiero pescar de comparar la historia como único espejo de lo que va a pasar en el futuro, pero cuando veo estas cosas, la imagen que me viene es la crisis petrolera de los 70 y el efecto que tuvo en las economías en los 80, especialmente en aquellas economías que dependen de la importación de petróleo. Hoy en día todavía la economía mundial depende del petróleo, por más que queramos no queramos aceptar, esa es la realidad. Pregunto, ¿sería descabellado hacer una comparación de lo que está pasando ahora en Medio Oriente, algo muy similar a lo que sucedió en los 70 con la crisis petrolera?
Yo creo que no, por dos razones. Primero, porque tenemos ahora gas natural. Es decir, el rol que tenía el gas natural dentro de la matriz energética hace 30 años era mínimo. Hoy en día, países como los Estados Unidos, países como Rusia, países como Trinidad y Tobago, Angola, otros países han incrementado su producción de gas natural, y muchos países han cambiado el combustible para generar electricidad de petróleo o carbón al gas natural, no solamente porque es más barato, pero sino que desde el punto de vista medioambiental es un combustible mucho más limpio. Así que hoy en día tenemos una gran producción de gas natural, que es un nuevo combustible, no para el transporte, en el transporte sí continuamos dependiendo en lo que es petróleo crudo, pero el rol del gas natural hoy en el mundo es mucho más importante de lo que teníamos hace 20 o 30 años.
Ok, lo que está pasando en Irak es preocupante para muchos, especialmente los que importan, el tema de la inflación, el tema de que no hay un crecimiento sostenible, el problema de que si se nos sube el precio de la gasolina es otro efecto que va a tener el bolsillo, por tanto afecta el consumo. Hay una preocupación. Tú como experto analista en el tema energético, ¿qué es lo que más te llama la atención y te preocupa de lo que puede estar sucediendo en Irak y que debemos prestar atención?
Yo creo, una vez más, es el efecto dominó, que es lo que estudiamos aquí nosotros en los escenarios que usamos en la Universidad de Texas. Es decir, qué impacto puede tener la situación en Irak en el resto de los productores. Aquí en los Estados Unidos, por ejemplo, estamos en la universidad estamos evaluando la posible pérdida de producción de Venezuela, la baja de producción en México y qué impacto pueda tener eso en la región. Así que hoy en día lo que nos preocupa no es solamente en los problemas que tiene un país en sí mismo, sino ese efecto dominó que pueda tener en una región que entonces sí, Javier, como tú mencionabas, puede impactar en una forma muy negativa las economías mundiales. Pero el gran reto de Irak es que Irak tiene 140.000 millones de reservas, es decir, una de las más grandes reservas del mundo están en Irak, y es un petróleo fácil de producir, no como es el de Venezuela, que es del Orinoco, que es un crudo extra pesado. El potencial de Irak, como dijiste al presentar tu programa al principio, es gigantesco. Así que no solamente es a corto plazo la pérdida que va a tener Irak, es decir, es también a largo plazo.
La realidad, señores, es que estamos involucrados. La globalización nos muestra que lo que pasa en Irak nos afecta hasta en Alaska. Jorge Piñón, fue un gusto haberte tenido en el programa.
Gracias, Javier.
La caída en los precios internacionales del petróleo ha provocado una verdadera guerra entre los países productores de este energético. En las últimas semanas, países miembros de la OPEP han cabildeado en favor de que se reduzcan los niveles de producción de petróleo y de esta manera poder subir el precio del barril. Sin embargo, todo parece indicar que no lo conseguirán. Por un lado se encuentra Rusia, uno de los principales productores de petróleo en el mundo, quien ya anunció que no reduciría sus niveles de producción. A esto se le debe agregar que Arabia Saudita, el líder de facto de la OPEP, se ha inclinado más en mantener los niveles de producción estables. En lo que concierne a México, el gobierno no puede darse el lujo a reducir los niveles de producción que ya por sí solos han caído lo suficiente. De tal modo, los ojos del mundo están puestos el día de hoy en la reunión de la OPEP para conocer cuál será su decisión final. Para conocer más de este tema y otros, puedes ingresar a la página de reporteindigo.com. Muchas gracias y hasta la próxima.
In the 1960s, 6 barrels of oil were found for every one that was used. 4 decades later, the world consumes between 3 and 6 barrels of oil for every one that it finds. Once the peak of world oil production is reached, demand for oil will outstrip supply, and the price of gasoline will fluctuate wildly, affecting far more than the cost of filling a car. Modern cities are fossil fuel dependent. Even roads are made from asphalt, a petroleum product, as are the roofs of many homes. Large areas would be uninhabitable without heating in the winter or air conditioning in the summer. Suburban sprawl encourages people to drive many miles to work, school and stores. Major cities have been zoned with residential and commercial areas placed far apart, forcing people to drive. Suburbia and many communities were designed on the assumption of plentiful oil and energy. Chemicals derived from fossil fuels, or petrochemicals, are essential in the manufacture of countless products. The modern system of agriculture is heavily dependent on fossil fuels, as are hospitals, aviation, water distribution systems, and the US military, which alone uses about 140 million barrels of oil a year. Fossil fuels are also essential for the creation of plastics and polymers, key ingredients in computers, entertainment devices, and clothing. The global economy currently depends on endless growth, demanding an increasing supply of cheap energy, fossil fuels, oil, and natural gas. A similar process occurred on land, which produced coal. It took nature about 5 million years to create the fossil fuels that the world consumes in 1 year. The modern way of life is dependent on this fossilized sunlight, although a surprising number of people take it for granted. Since 1860, geologists have discovered over 2 trillion barrels of oil. Since then, the world has used approximately half. Before you can pump oil, you have to discover it. At first it was easy to find and cheap to extract. The first great American oil field was Spindletop, discovered in 1900. Many more followed. Geologists scoured America. They found enormous deposits of oil, natural gas, and coal. America produced more oil than any other country, enabling it to become an industrial superpower. Once an oil well starts producing oil, it's only a matter of time before it enters a decline. Individual wells have different production rates. When many wells are averaged together, the combined graph looks like a bell curve. Typically, it takes 40 years after the peak of discovery for a country to reach its peak of production, after which it enters a permanent fall. In the 1950s, Shell geophysicist M. King Hubbard predicted that America's oil production would peak in 1970, 40 years. This is the Earth, as it looked 90 million years ago. Geologists call this period the Late Cretaceous. It was a time of extreme global warming, when dinosaurs still ruled the planet. They went about their lives secure in their place at the top of the food chain, oblivious to the changes taking place around them. The continents were drifting apart, opening huge rifts in the Earth's crust. They flooded, becoming seas. Algae thrived in the extreme heat, poisoning the water. They died and fell in their trillions to the bottom of the rifts. Rivers washed sediment into the seas, until the organic remains of the algae were buried. As the pressure grew, so did the heat, until a chemical reaction transformed the organics into hydrocarbon. We are so dependent on oil and other fossil fuels that even a small disruption in supply may have far-reaching effects on every aspect of our lives. Energy is the ability to do work. The average American has available the energy equivalent of about 150 slaves working 24 hours a day. Materials that store this energy for work are called fuels. Some fuels contain more energy than others. This is called energy density. Of these fuels, oil is the most critical. The world consumes 30 billion barrels a year, equal to 1 cubic mile of oil, which contains as much energy as would be generated from 52 nuclear power plants working for the next 50 years. Although oil only generates 1.6% of US electricity, it powers 96% of all transportation. In 2008, 2/3 of America's oil was imported. Most was from Canada, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Nigeria, Iraq, and Angola. Several factors make oil unique. It is energy dense. 1 barrel contains the energy equivalent of almost 3 years of human labor. It is liquid at room temperature, easy to transport, and usable in small engines. Years after the peak of US oil discovery, few believed him. However, in 1970, American oil production peaked and entered a permanent decline. Hubbard was vindicated. From this point on, America would depend increasingly on imported oil. This made her vulnerable to supply disruptions and contributed to the economic mayhem of the 1973 and 1979 oil shocks. The 1930s saw the highest rate of oil discoveries in US history. In spite of advanced technology, the decline in the discovery of new American oil fields has been relentless. More recent finds, such as Anwar, would at best provide enough oil for 17 months. Even the new Jack 2 field in the Gulf of Mexico would only supply a few months of domestic demand. Though large, neither field comes close to satisfying America's energy requirements. Evidence is now mounting that world oil production is peaking or is close to it. Globally, the rate of discovery of new oil fields peaked in the 1960s. Over 40 years later, the decline in discovery of new fields seems unstoppable. 54 of the 65 major oil-producing nations have already peaked in production. Many of the others are expected to follow in the near future. The world will need to bring the equivalent of a new Saudi Arabia into production every 3 years to make up for declining output in existing oil fields.